Hello, and welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. Our goal in the RMR is to help marketers move from subject matter experts to strategic business partners. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm thrilled to introduce Anna Leary. Anna, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I am Anna Leary. I have been in marketing operations for over 6 years, I guess 6.5 years now. I kind of fell into it accidentally, like most people seem to do. I was in marketing a little bit longer than that, graduated with a degree in advertising from the University of South Carolina, go Gamecocks. And I've just been building my knowledge in Marketo specifically. I do some MarTech consulting now full time. I'm self-employed. So that's been a really fun adventure for me to kind of explore what I like doing and working with clients that I love to work with. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And I love the world of attribution. That's where my heart lies. I realized after working in marketing automation for so long, and the buzzword of attribution came up a few years ago, and I kind of fell into that and really enjoy helping companies uncover how they can better tie things to revenue and see what's actually working for them.
Which is perfect for the topic we've chosen today. So, as someone who's been involved in B2B revenue analytics for longer than I'd like to admit, I've had conversations with people and told them, yes, attribution works. I've seen it work, but they typically don't believe me. And I think a lot of that comes from people trying to implement a solution and it falls down, or they can't convince leadership that it works. And it's a bit of a black box, and so many reasons. Have you seen people implement it correctly? Can I get somebody else to say, yes, it can work for people?
Yes, I have actually seen companies implement it successfully. I feel like every company is going to have some vision of what they want, and they're never going to hit that 100% purity of attribution that they want. But companies that have really organized processes, they have defined data structures. So anything from a defined UTM structure, a Salesforce campaign structure, you wouldn't believe the amount of companies that actually don't have that, which is crazy. Or, any other CRM. I'm a Salesforce person, so that's probably what I'll talk about the most. Required metadata, with those campaigns, a lot of companies actually just kind of have rogue processes. So the companies that are really successful with implementing attribution are the companies that have those required metadata fields that have to be populated on every campaign so that they can build out reports from that. So those are the companies typically that I've seen do attribution really well, and the implementation process goes pretty smoothly because they actually do have some idea of what their data is, and it's not as messy as it could be. Now, I will say that no one has perfect data. That's not going to happen. But companies that have thought through actually how to structure their data and what's actually really important to their companies in terms of reporting, those are companies that I've seen implement attribution successfully.
So those people listening to us and hearing this and thinking, oh my gosh, my system's a mess, it's not going to be worth the time to fix it. Have you seen benefits and time savings for the people who have gone through the painful process of establishing hierarchies, putting them in place, and getting their data in line?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's something that I recommend. We'll probably touch on this, but I'm a big proponent of centers of excellence and process-oriented teams and things like that. And so I think the biggest thing is that you have to actually prioritize structuring your data in a way that's going to help you in the long run, with attribution and being able to tie your metrics to how you're actually generating revenue. If you have messy data, take the time to sit down and think about little baby steps on how you can organize that data, because it will save you a lot of time in the long run when you're wanting to implement another tool or something like that. If you have just, the basics down of some sort of data structure, then that's going to help save so much time and help you run more efficiently in the long run.
And as somebody who's used several different attribution tools, including CaliberMind, and built my own data warehouse, I can tell you that when I was either forced through limited budgets or not enough belief in the power of analytics to pull all that information together in spreadsheets, it would take days every single month. It would take a
Oh,
big chunk. And now that I'm living in an environment that has everything automated, I don't even have to think about it. So I think that should be a huge motivator for people.
yes. Yes, I'm so lucky that I am living in the time of marketing being way more automated.
Mhm.
And it's funny when you see companies doing things like that, you're like, we can automate this. Let's do that, let's make this more efficient where we can. Let's save time where we can. So, yeah, I'm totally with you there.
I almost want to say, yes, I know it hurts right now, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, and it doesn't have to be some long drawn out process. Like you can start with just basic identifying your basic program channels is a good start. Identifying a basic UTM structure so that you can start collecting good data on digital campaigns that you run. You'd be surprised at the companies that actually have no UTM structure. And so,
No, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be that surprised.
well, it's funny because, I've seen companies that have bought attribution tools, which are very expensive tools. And I say, all right, so can you provide me a spreadsheet of your UTM structure or just some kind of outline? And they're like, we actually don't have that. And I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe we'll start there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we'll go from there.
So that brings up a really good point. Every attribution tool you put in place, no matter how much work the vendor does for you, you're still going to need to, at minimum, take the time to define what you want. And that involves looking at best practices, and a lot of vendors will make recommendations. But it's important to know that you have some prep work to do. And the amount of prep work is going to vary, but the one consistent truth is that the prep work is there. Key pain points and how people can avoid them as they set up their attribution tool.
Oh man. So there are a lot of pain points when getting an attribution tool that I think can definitely be avoided with the prep work that you've mentioned. So a lot of companies that are investing in an attribution tool typically have a marketing automation platform. I will likely mention Marketo because that's my bread and butter. And I'm not just partial to Marketo. There's a lot of good Eloqua and HubSpot and Pardot people out there. So shout out to you guys. But having a scalable center of excellence with a marketing automation platform, I think is a really good start to avoid pain points. And people are probably kind of, scratching their head at this one, but that's kind of where a lot of marketing flows through. It's your marketing automation platform. You've got all of your digital spend probably tied to your marketing automation platform. So having scalable templates, programs that you run all of your assets through or that are tied to having defined channels. So making sure you define like what's a webinar, what's online advertising, things like that. And having data management within your marketing automation platform and having a consistent, country value, having a consistent lead source value, those types of things are really good ways to kind of start with scaling out on the way to attribution and helping you to avoid the pain point down the road of not having that data structured. A second step from that would be looking at your CRM. So with Salesforce, I know the use of campaigns are heavily tied to some attribution tools, and campaigns actually collect a lot of data in terms of offline channels. So things that aren't running digitally. So content send, even third-party forms that you might have, sometimes LinkedIn lead gen, things like that. Those actually have to be tied to campaigns and CRM. So you need to have a very well-defined campaign structure to actually be able to scale and use that data in a way that can help you tie that to attribution.
And I see a lot of people trying to benchmark per lead or contact and putting benchmarks on that record instead of the campaign member record. The big drawback to that is you're assuming people are going in a linear motion, and in B2B, they're little squirrels just running all over the place in and out of the funnel. So
oh yeah. That's
If
my
you,
favorite part about attribution, is being able to kind of see those different
yes.
touch points and, how people come back to you. It could be years.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, so many people will interact with paid advertising or retargeting, but not immediately fill out a form. That's really
Hmm.
typical. So it is such a great way to prove the value of interactions that take place either well before or well after an opportunity is created. Big fan.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of templates because it kind of sets up the rest of the team for success. And
Hmm.
so does, how do you feel about documentation?
Oh, I am a big fan of documentation.
Yay.
I'm a huge fan of process and documenting process. I think process is everything when it comes to actually being a part of a marketing operations team or a revenue operations team. Being actually enabled by your team leaders of those teams to ensure that the process is being followed. I think that's very crucial in having strong database health, because I've seen times where it's kind of a free for all sometimes and a bit rogue. And that leads to pitfalls down the road. If campaigns are missing data, if your process is missing, it has holes in it where people don't know what they're supposed to be doing, so they just kind of do whatever they want, that's not going to help you in the long run. So that's something that I think can help actually lay the foundation for decent attribution down the road.
Totally. It's like your key to continuity after you leave. So as
Mm-hmm.
contractors, our goal is to temporarily be there and set the company up for success. That's how we get additional jobs down the road.
Right.
I think internal people should look at it the same way. Your goal is to be promoted and move on. Make it easier for the next person to come in and fill your shoes.
Yes. And kind of tied to that, this is something that I see as one of the biggest pain points when it comes to implementing attribution or an attribution tool, is actually resourcing for teams. So I've seen a lot of people, a lot of companies, they get really excited about the prospect of what attribution is and what it can do for them in terms of showing what's actually tied to revenue. So they actually move forward with purchasing a tool that costs a lot of money for what it does. But then once they get that tool, it's purchased and it kind of sits there. The project gets delayed. You put it on the highest shelf possible in the room and it just collects dust, or you implement it and then it just sits there. I actually do less implementations and more optimizations of certain attribution tools,
Mm-hmm.
because people have purchased it and they actually don't have the resources on their team to actually support the tool. And so it just kind of sits there. And so I think that's a huge pain point when it comes to attribution, is probably what has actually led to it having kind of a negative connotation sometimes with different companies and different people.
Yeah, if you're going to purchase an attribution tool, part of that purchasing plan should be somebody who can maintain it and
Yes.
socialize it with the rest of the company properly. I don't think there's a good replacement for a solid analyst who can sell the rest of the business on it and speak to it in a way that keeps the momentum going. I've seen that a lot too. Or the person who was resourced in their leaves and no one touches the attribution tool or does anything with it, which I think is a big loss because it can really help you hone in and improve your campaigns.
Yes. And it's something that can consistently be optimized as well. And if you don't have anyone tied to diving into it, at least on a weekly basis, you're losing out on crucial data. And then it piles up over time. And after a year goes by, you're looking for this data that you definitely need to kind of show value for what you've been working on for the past year. But you have to take, that's goes back to time savings, right? Like that's a big pain point, is that people lose out on time savings just because of resourcing, and they don't have people resourced for those positions.
Yeah, and if you're using a tool to optimize campaigns, think of it like your campaigns. So with your campaigns, you never just set them and forget them and never come back and revisit them because the market's constantly changing. I mean, look what happened in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Same attitude should apply to anything that's supporting those efforts. So you're not
Right.
just going to stick to one plan and have it always mean the same thing. Email interactions are going to decline in value. Form fills maybe go up in value because you have less gated content and less interactions
Mm-hmm.
like that. So yeah, I I love your point.
I used to work in search management, so paid search campaigns, and you actually had to optimize those daily. You had to make sure that and these were huge companies, like huge retail companies that we were working for, but you had to go in and check their spend every day. You had to make sure that your cost was optimized for each keyword. And so that mentality should be for not just for your paid search and, your paid online advertising campaigns. That's attribution as well. Like you need to dedicate resources to that as well.
Love it. So when people are considering what kind of attribution tool to purchase, there's quite a few out there now. What things should they take into consideration as they're buying? So this is assuming you either don't have something right now or you have something that's not working for you. What should people take into account when they purchase a tool?
Definitely what your MarTech stack looks like and where are you pointing all of that data? Is it all pointing to one central location like a data warehouse? Is it all pointing to, is most of it pointing to a CRM that you can pull, or is it all pointing to different locations where you're going to have to hack the system to make sure you can get it all together at one point? I think that's a huge element to think about when you're looking at an attribution tool. And also, I think a big part of getting an attribution tool is kind of thinking about the different elements of reporting that you need to prove value, because it's different for every company. And so I think thinking about if you actually have the data or the fields, things like that, to first support pulling those reports, and then how you can combine all of that data into an attribution tool to see how it's working.
I love that. I'm a really big advocate of having attribution, engagement, and intent easy to access because you use them at different points of the funnel. And if that's important to you, find a tool that either does it all or easily integrates. And then loved your point about looking at the tech stack, because a lot of times these attribution tools are a bolt-on to either your map or your CRM.
Right.
And if you don't have all the base information there and it's not clean, garbage in, garbage out.
Oh, totally. And it becomes a nightmare. It really does to actually manage, because you're trying to figure out how to, once you bolt on an attribution tool to one of those tech tools, you're kind of stuck with that. And so you kind of have to end up manipulating how you've done things for quite some time to make it work for you. So that can be a huge pain when dealing with attribution tools.
Yeah, so if that's a blocker, look for somebody who can help you navigate around it. I mean, there are vendors out there that do that.
Yeah, I think that B2B marketers need to move away from thinking attribution is some magical solution that's going to solve all of marketing's problems. I think it's somehow been given this unicorn status. Oh, you've got multi-touch attribution. Wow, you must really have it together. I feel like a lot of marketers, especially B2B marketers, give attribution a negative connotation because they've either tried it with an outside tool or they've tried a homegrown solution and it hasn't worked how they've wanted it to, because most likely there were issues with data or not being able to tie it to certain objects and things like that. So it is a hard concept to implement and do well. And I think people give up on it too quickly. But if you have your data structured in a way that you think that you can get some good reporting out of it, I mean, my advice is don't give up on attribution. I think attribution is definitely here to stay. And it's something that is very important when it comes to reporting on how revenue is tied to your different tactics. There's nothing else out there that really can give you that insight. And, we live in a world today where multi-touch attribution can be seen. Your whole journey of how you interacted with a company can so easily be seen. And so focusing on how you can hone in on that data and make your campaigns better is something that I think will be here for the long run. And don't give up on it, because attribution is really cool once you see how it works well.
And I've seen companies who have figured out, my goal is really to prove our ROI. So let's incorporate everybody else's activities too, to give a fair representation of what marketing's bringing to the table. And that's priceless. I mean, I can't think of a CFO who doesn't want to know for every dollar they put in, how many dollars they get out. That's the usual question. And the closest you're going to get to that is attribution. However, I love how you said it's not a miracle cure for everything. Like if you're doing a lot of podcast advertising, this isn't going to really solve for figuring out how much of your revenue is coming from there unless you're willing to do some manual fixes like promotion codes and that sort of thing. It's going to be as limited as your data. And I think you really need to go to your vendor with a clear definition of what you're trying to do.
Yes, totally. And I also think too, there's some sort of lack of understanding of the different attribution models that exist. So obviously you can make a custom model, right? Like you can have it whatever you want, but there is importance when it comes to people kind of brush off like first touch or lead creation models that give, weight to those specific interactions. But those are actually really crucial interactions to know how people are actually coming to interact with you. And a specific team within marketing does want to know that data. They need to know where to spend their money to actually have those leads generated, like the demand gen team, right? They want to know what campaigns are driving people to their site. The content team wants to know what content people are interacting with the most. And then you have, op creation where sales wants to know, hey, what interaction were they having right before this op was created? And then what interaction did they have right before it was closed won? And that's really important data. And people just I think they confuse all these models that you have. They think they're kind of like tied, or they're like, I don't necessarily see the importance of first touch. I'm like, well, you might not see the importance of first touch, but there definitely is another team here that does see the importance of a first touch model.
Absolutely.
So I think just keeping in mind, there are important elements to each model that exists, and then you can develop your own custom model that works for your team specifically. Revenue ops might have a different way that they want to see how things are weighted. So I think that's another issue that people don't quite understand, is the importance of the different models. And so getting away from thinking like, oh, we don't need this model, that's not important to us. They're all important. You have to know how people are interacting at different points and where to kind of put your money. That's what attribution is about.
I guess I would say don't limit yourself to one model.
Exactly.
Because yeah. And multiple should be available for you. There's even disagreement on our team as we're building them, which ones are more important. Some like the W shape. I use first touch to figure out if our awareness campaigns are working. I'm a big fan of even weighted and not putting on any of them, but there's a use case for everyone. So I thank you for bringing that point up.
No problem.
Thank you so much for being a guest. Where can people find you online?
Yes. Well, I recently launched a website. It's Blayz, Blayz Co.com, named after my son. And you can find me there. I have a form. You can also email me at anna@blayzco.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Anna Leary. I think it's linkedin.com/Anna Leary is my LinkedIn.
And we will provide the link on our website, as we always do. And if you're looking for more information like this, check out calibermind.com.